defense, for example. The Minister of Defense is always a very important person. The Minister of Health is normally an unknown entity. And that is poor global health management. And so we come to the problem. One problem was shortage of funds, but there is this second problem now of low priority being given to a problem which is fundamentally important. Obstacles to distribution, basically poverty. I hope I've answered both your questions. We go to Florum for two questions from Florum. Because your voice was out at the beginning.
Oh, okay. You said before that profitable companies are not allowing the use of their medicine in poor countries for less money, but at some point, shouldn't the national government step in and force them to put health over profit?
Okay, second question.
There's a program which is called PEPFAR, in which President Bush, and PEPFAR stands for the President's Emergency Fund for the Care and Treatment of AIDS. I'm intrigued to know your thoughts and your response, and also your insights into a situation that seems to be contradictory. In other words, President Bush set aside $15 billion over, I think, a course of a 5-year period. And that $15 billion was to be used to provide AIDS treatment in sub-Saharan Africa. So I'm interested in your thoughts and your explanation, because it seems so much out of character for President Bush to be devoting $15 billion, not 15 million, but $15 billion for that purpose. Now, we also know, a most recently published book indicates that the war in Iraq may well cost in excess of $3 trillion. And the relationship between 15 billion and 3 trillion is astronomical. But I wonder what your thoughts are regarding this anomalous behavior of President Bush setting aside $15 billion, which seems to fly in the face of the generalizations you've made and your focus on civil society rather than the government.
Okay, very good questions, both of them. The first one is, why can't governments force pharmaceutical companies to sell cheap in developing countries? That is basically the question. The problem is that pharmaceutical companies own patents, and these patents are law. And you cannot tinker with the law. The only way to tinker with the law of patents is through what is called generics, or which is easily described also as piracy. And now the question is the following. If you have manufactured a drug that you can sell in the United States for $5, and if India can produce that drug at 5 cents instead of $5, but in producing it at 5 cents, it will be going against the patent which is held by the American company. And now you are the government of the United States. Who are you going to defend? The law and the right of the patent holder, or the pirate who may be working for a humanitarian cause, but who's nevertheless a pirate? He's Robin Hood. Are you for Robin Hood, who is interested in the poor, or are you going to defend your own aristocrats who have elected you to government? It's a very difficult choice. And it's the type of choice that makes presidents have their hair go white, because you become the president of the country by the electors in your own country, not by the electors in Africa and India. And the electors have brought you there to defend American citizens and American corporations. That's why you are paid to be the president of a country. And yet your heart says, but it's not fair, I want to help. How are you going to resolve? The companies, the pharmaceutical companies, will not let go of their profits. If they can make a profit, why should they give up their profit? We can't even make the oil companies sell gas cheap in the United States, even though gas prices are coming down, or at the pump the prices stay the same. How does this happen? When gas prices go up and oil prices go up, gas prices immediately jump up, literally within hours. But when oil prices come down, the gas prices stay high. How does that happen? So you can't push. And that push you cannot do because you are a democracy. If you were a dictatorship, there'd be no problem. You just give an order and send in the Marines and bring down the price of gas and bring down the price of pharmaceuticals. But democracy is frightfully important as a concept. And so you have this problem of choice, and it's not an easy problem to resolve. The one between patents, laws, and profits on the one side, and fairness, justice, and ill health on the other. And that's why we had a huge discussion on AIDS in sub-Saharan Africa and the antiretroviral drugs, because it took 2 years before we could work out the formula, and ultimately public pressure is what forced the pharmaceutical companies to pull down the price of these drugs in Africa. It is civil society which ultimately made life miserable for the pharmaceutical companies and said, we don't think this is fair, we may be your shareholders, but we don't want people in Africa to die from AIDS. And in Brazil, because the case was brought up by both South Africa and Brazil. And they won ultimately, not because of the government, but because of civil society. That is to say, you, students and citizens in the United States. Your second question was about President Bush's formula. I hope you know that when you make a speech, it does not mean that you have implemented the speech. The fact that he spoke about $15 billion does not mean that $15 billion have been put into the kitty. They have not. The actual disbursement is less than 1/3 of what was said was going to be disbursed, even on an annual basis. And so disbursement does not always follow a statement of objectives. But that being said, you yourself have pointed out the inconsistency. Even if we accept $15 billion over 5 years, compare that to Stiglitz talking about $3 trillion, and I hope in Iraq, and I hope that you've noted that Stiglitz, who is a Nobel Prize winner, has said this is the most conservative estimate, and that the actual figure may be double that. Most people think that what has been spent in Iraq, or as a consequence of Iraq, is $5 trillion. And that is why the debate about the coming elections in the presidency is focusing, and will focus even more, on Iraq, because at the moment they're only saying the war was wrong. Sooner or later, the point will come that it is the expenditure on Iraq which is contributing to the recession in the United States. And so you realize no country can afford to throw $3 trillion of its national economy into an adventure abroad. It cannot be done. And so you notice that there is volatility in the market. Dow Jones jumps up and down for no reason. There's a crisis of confidence. Public confidence is breaking. And that's why people are not spending enough. Because if your confidence is not there, you say, let me not spend the money today. Let's see how things are next week or next month. And so public confidence has broken, because we cannot sustain neither the $5 trillion, nor can we sustain the equally important problem, which is that of a country which is consuming more than it is producing. And that